Hello. Well, I've just finished relaying these patio slabs. They had become very uneven and wobbly, and it took quite a bit of work. I had 3.5 bags of sand, which I had to lay and level, and then put all the slabs back. But it's done now. They're all level, nice and sturdy. The table's sturdy, so I'm really chuffed. So next thing I need to do is start to build my bean supports. So I thought I'd like to talk about the different types of support that many vegetable plants are going to need to grow well. Now, you can buy many structures in the garden centres and online, but I prefer to build my own, and with some creativity and some basic materials you can easily make your own at really low cost. Now, I'm using Trellis to train my climbing beans and my runner beans because I want to make a statement in my garden. But in the past I have used bamboo canes and they work well, but they can fall over in high winds. So last year I tried the Trellis and it worked particularly well. However, I think that we could all agree it'd be a little bit over the top if you use something like this on an allotment. Now, climbing beans and runner beans, naturally they wrap their way around the support as they grow, so it's really important that you build a sturdy structure for them. And if you are planning on using bamboo canes, then here are a few key points. So, number one, make sure your canes are at least 6 foot tall, but ideally 8 foot tall, like these. Now, you want them to be in really good condition. You don't want any that are old and weathered, so like this, because they become very, very brittle. Secondly, what type of support do you think you need for your beans? Well, one common method is to create an A-frame support. Now, you can do this easily by inserting canes and poles into the ground in 2 rows, and then you add a horizontal cane across the top, tying them in for some stability. Now, this setup works really well when you have space and you plan to grow lots of plants. Another easy option is if you build a wigwam support. Now, that is really great if you're only growing, say, 6 to 8 plants in a much smaller area. Thirdly, tying them together. Now, if you care about the environment, you may want to use jute, but there is a word of warning: the birds absolutely love this, as they can shred it in absolutely no time for their nests. Now, many of my past structures have actually been weakened because of this, and the last thing you want is to turn up at your plot and part of your structure has actually collapsed, damaging your healthy plants. So alternatively, you can buy these plastic adjustable ties or flexi ties, which are all reusable. Now, I'm going to be using cable ties on these frames just because they are heavy and I need a lot of firm support. So there's many vegetables and fruits that are going to need support to grow strong and productive. So if we look at soft fruits, for instance, so your raspberries, loganberries and even blackberries, now they produce fruit on long stems known as canes, and these canes grow really well when they are tied onto a tension wire suspended between 2 posts. It will keep them really tidy. It makes it so much easier for harvesting, and better still, when it comes to pruning, it makes it easy to separate the old and the new growth. So these are all my broad beans. Now these are another prime example of a plant that needs to be supported. Now these are going to grow to about 4 foot tall, probably a little bit taller than that, and they can become really heavily laden with quite large bean pods. Now that makes them very vulnerable to high winds, so if we do have it quite windy they can topple over and snap, and if that happens then you're going to lose your plants. Now I'm using canes and string at regular intervals, and I'll continue to put layers in as the plants grow up. Now they're not the most robust, but they're enough to keep them contained, and when they're contained they kind of support each other, and they should be just enough to stop them from falling over. So let's talk about garden peas. Now I grow these every year because they're absolutely delicious. I never grow enough to freeze any because I just don't have the room. But they rarely get to the kitchen anyway, because there is nothing I love more in the summer than when I'm pottering about the garden, seeing a juicy pod, picking it and then eating the peas raw. I tend to grow dwarf varieties, so that's your Meteor, Ambassador, Kelvedon Wonder, and I also grow Kent Blue, which is a heritage or rare variety. Now these tend to grow between 30 and 75 centimetres, so that's, I think it's 18-29 inches. They're fairly compact compared to, say, alderman, which can reach up to, I don't know, 200 centimetres, so 45 inches. But nevertheless, they are all natural climbers, and they send out these tendrils, if you can see these little tendrils, to grip onto each other and support each other as they climb. Now my peas are growing really nicely in this guttering. They will need to be at least 6 inches tall before I can even attempt to slide them out into their planting place, because I need the root system to be really sort of quite developed and compact so that they hold together in one piece. Now these are the Kent Blue. These are more or less ready to go out, but I'm going to harden them off over the next couple of days. But these have got the tendrils as well. I don't know if you can see them. And likewise, sweet peas. Now these aren't edible, these are decorative. I've pinched the tips out so that they'll bush up more, but these will have those same tendrils as well to help them cling on to this obelisk that's beside me. Now I'm going to be planting my peas in this bed. Now traditionally, pea sticks are created using twiggy branches inserted sort of vertically behind the plants to support them. I've often created just simple support lines using canes and string and even wigwams. Now you can also buy netting specifically for peas and beans, and it's really good for the plants to scramble up. It works really well, but it is a pain at the end of the season when it comes to stripping that netting of every last bit of stem and of the hundreds of tendrils that are wrapped around it. So it's just something that I'm not really keen on using. So for the last few years I've been using these racks, and they work brilliantly. And if you don't recognise them, they're just old shelving from a mini greenhouse. It's when space is a premium. Oh, it's an absolutely glorious morning. It's only 9:30 at the moment, but we've got wall-to-wall sunshine, beautiful blue skies, no cloud whatsoever, and the current temperature in here at the moment is 29 degrees. So it is absolutely perfect for discussing tomatoes. Now, tomatoes are a really popular edible for most gardeners. Now, I work in a garden centre, and one of the joys I find is that if I'm actually on the checkout, is talking to customers about their purchases, because they come up to the till with trolleys loads of plants, but generally most of them have tomato plants, and I ask them, you know, if they grow any vegetables, and a lot of them actually say no, they don't, except tomatoes. They all grow tomatoes, and they're quite easy to grow, as long as you get the watering correct. And they seem to do really, really well here in the UK undercover in greenhouses, and if you've got like the lean-to temporary or mini greenhouses. Now we can grow them outside, and we do grow them outside, but they can be vulnerable to blight, which is an airborne fungal disease, and if your plants do get blight, it will decimate them and the fruit will be no good. So I think that's probably why most people like myself tend to grow most of their tomatoes undercover. Tomatoes, they fall into two types. You've got your determinate, which means we know how tall they're going to grow, and they're usually the bush varieties, Roma being one of them. You don't really need to train them in any way, they'll just support themselves. But the other type are the indeterminate. Now, just by the name, as it suggests, they're a vine type, and they will just keep growing. They just don't seem to stop. And these are the ones that are going to need some support. Now, I know that many of our friends across the pond tend to grow their tomatoes in what they would class as a tomato cage. So it's a tall cylindrical cage. I think they use cattle panels or some kind of rigid wire netting. So they build their cages, and that is such a great idea because it allows the plant to be supported on all sides. Now, we don't tend to use anything like that over here. I certainly haven't seen anybody over here use a tomato cage, and I certainly haven't used one. What we tend to do here in the UK is that when we plant our tomatoes, we put in one sturdy cane to support the main stem. Now, best practice is really on the indeterminate is to grow the central stem. It will produce side shoots. It's best to trim them off and just concentrate on a central stem, and then only allow it to produce, say, 5 trusses of fruit, and then we cut it off beyond that point. That way all the energy goes into producing the best fruit. So another popular method is to grow your main stem up a taut piece of string. Now, this is really good for greenhouses, or it's ideal for greenhouses and polytunnels, because you've got structures that you can tie this string onto. So the idea is, if I just demonstrate with this pot, imagine that's the root ball. What you do is you dig your hole, your planting hole, and you put a part of the string into the growing hole. You then put your plant on top, and then as the roots grow, they sort of wrap themselves round this end of the string and secures it. And the other end you pull really taut and you fix it above. And the idea is, as the plant's central stem starts to grow, you wrap it around the string to support it. Now, this method works really, really well, and if you follow Gardener's World and you're a fan of Monty Don, you'll know that in his greenhouse this is the method that he always uses. You could actually employ it on your plot if you built yourself a really sturdy A-frame in which to tie the string onto. So it is becoming certainly a more popular way of growing tomatoes. So the past few years I've been using these tomato halos. Now, in essence, they're raised pots with a very generous reservoir for deep root watering. Now, tomatoes are really thirsty plants, so this system works really well, and you can also apply liquid feeds directly into the central pot. So another feature that I really like about these halos is they've got these 3 anchor points where you can insert your canes, and it comes with this little topper which you can fit on the top of your canes to create a really sturdy wigwam for your plant to be supported by. Now, using plant supports, they're going to enhance the health and the appearance of your garden or your plot. They're a really simple and effective way to help your plants thrive. Now, I've not covered every crop that will need support, but I'll add a list at the end. Now I know it can be tempting to look online and through glossy catalogues for ready-made structures such as bean and pea arches, and they can be pricey and often not very good. So most of the supports that I have suggested are just made using bamboo canes and twine. It's that easy, it doesn't need to be complicated at all. But if you've got an ornamental garden like mine, you may want to use decorative frames, arches and trellises to create a statement. But I think there's something really quite unique and traditionally rustic when you make your own structures. You know your plots, you know your gardens, and you'll soon know what works. And that can be very rewarding. So don't forget to like this video and share with me some of your favourite plant support tips in the comments below. But finally, I'm tantalisingly close to 3k subscribers. I can't quite believe it. So if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and help me reach that milestone. So thank you so much for watching. I'm Annie and this is my kitchen garden.